Hello, and welcome to this video about making codebooks. Codebooks are used in all sorts of research, both qualitative research like interviews and quantitative research like surveys. Codebooks are for recording, remembering, and communicating your data, so they're a very important part of the research process. But what is a codebook? When I hear the word codebook, I think of spies, and that's not entirely wrong. During the American Revolution, General Washington's spymaster set up a famous spy ring in occupied New York to keep him informed about British movements. A farmer named Abraham Woodhull used the alias Sam Culper, and he sent secret messages to the American camp about British movements. The problem was that the British might actually intercept one of these messages and figure out what it said. That would be bad. So, the Culper spy ring used a secret code. This copy here is a portion of their codebook. Mr. Woodhull had one copy, and General Washington had another, and the British didn't have one at all, so they couldn't figure out what the messages said. It worked something like this. Abraham would see something, he'd translate it into numbers with his codebook, and then send those numbers by messengers, and then Washington would decode it with his own codebook. So, for example, what if Abraham wanted to send the message to General Washington there were 3,000 British infantry on Long Island? How would he code that? Why don't you try it? Pause the video here for a little bit and see if you can figure this out. Did you get something like this? In any case, once General Washington got this message, he would know that it read 3,000 enemy infantry camp Long Island and signed from Sam Culper. So, spy stories are fun and all, but how does this help us do research? Essentially, we're doing the same thing Sam Culper and General Washington did. We have a story that we're interested in, but we want to write it down as numbers. Now, this could be because we're lazy and numbers are easier to write, or it could be because we want to do statistical analyses on our data, or whatever. In any case, we need a system, right, a code, to translate back and forth between stories and numbers. Now, let's take a look at an example. So personally, I study Japanese politics. In Japan, the mainstream press is generally reliable and usually only publishes verifiable facts, not rumors, no fake news. That's the tabloid's job. This is an advertisement that appeared in a subway for a tabloid. Unlike the National Enquirer here in the US, though, quite often the rumors that these tabloids publish turn out to be true. So it's actually an interesting place to learn about politics behind the scenes. Now, one of my research ideas was to read all of these political tabloids for a year and count how many of the stories in them came true and what kind of stories did the tabloids get right or wrong. In this particular tabloid, there are sort of three sections there, the red and the white and blue in the middle, and then the one on the far left. The one on the right is about a former prime minister's son breaking up with his TV announcer girlfriend. The one in the middle is about a vice minister, sort of like a congressman, at the Health and Welfare Ministry taking bribes. Maybe I'll do this research project someday, but for now, let's just use it to think about how to do coding. Okay, so I could record a lot of data about these stories. You know, I mean, these were several page long stories, and I could write down all of those words, but that would be, oh man, that'd be awful. So I want to write down in numbers. This is easier and more efficient. So let's think about what I could write down here and keep it simple for the purposes of this video. So the first question I might have is, who's this about? Right? What kind of person is this the story about or this scandal about? The second, you know, everything's about sex, drugs, and money, so I'd want to know which of them is it. And finally, I could ask, well, how bad is this scandal? You know, some are worse than others. Let's think about how we could do coding schemes for all three of these questions. For the first question, well, there are three possibilities, and so we could just number them 1, 2, and 3. So if for the first story is about TV announcer, for example, I'm not going to write down TV announcer. I'm not going to write down celebrity. I'm going to write down the number 2. Okay, I'm coding those word values for each answer into a number. Now, how do we do this? The second one, pretty self-explanatory. Again, sex, drugs, and money. So, for example, in the second story, the one about the vice minister taking bribes, I wouldn't write down bribes. I would write down 3 for money. Now, this one's a little bit different in that we're making a badness scale. From 1 is the least bad to 5 is the most bad. This is a subjective scale, but that's okay. I'm a trained professional, so I'm allowed to do that. So in this case, we might, there's no particular words that you have to use, but just know that from a 1 is least and 5 is most. Okay. Once I have these coding schemes all worked out, I'm going to write it up in a document that looks like this. At the top, it should have all the relevant information so you know what the code book is when you find it on your computer 6 months from now. Then, it should list the coding for each variable one at a time, as I've done here. Let's try using this. So, for the first story about the TV announcer, this is about celebrities, so we're going to write a 2. Presumably there's sex involved, so we'll put a 1 for that. And, breaking up isn't so bad, but it's kind of embarrassing. It's all over the news, so we'll call it a 2. The second story there about the politician, this is a little more complicated. The politician is sort of the Japanese equivalent of a congressman working as the Secretary of Labor. Seems to be taking bribes from foreigners. Is it true? Who knows? But, we can code it anyway. So we're coding it as a 1 for politicians, a 3 for money. How bad is it? These sort of things happen in Japanese politics all the time. He'll have to lay low for a while, though, I expect. So we'll call it a 3. Now, what can we do with this? We can put it in a spreadsheet. In the sample I made here, each row is 1 observation, which in this case is 1 story. Each column is 1 variable. See how efficient this is? With just 4 numbers, I can write down what I need to know for an entire story. But the code book is super important. If you lose that, then you won't know what those numbers mean. One time, actually, personally, I gathered data on social networks from students and wrote the codebook out by hand. So I figured I'd put it in the computer someday. But then I cleaned my office and actually threw it away by mistake and ruined literally all of the work I had done collecting data. So don't be like me. Save your codebook, take care of it, and make good use of it. All right. Thank you for watching.